A lot of people have left the country. About a quarter of the population have fled the country, which is going to affect the human resource base of the country.
There's something called the push-pull theory of immigration, and that means that people are pushed out of their homeland. So it could be economics, it could be politics, it could be just other opportunities that aren't available to them. Or it could be that they're pulled into the country that they actually end up entering into, because that country does have certain resources available, certain opportunities available. And usually the push-pull kind of works together, pushing them out of one area and pulling them into maybe the US as opposed to Britain, or into Canada as opposed to the US. With Bratton's case, certainly the US has a lot of opportunities in terms of athletics, right? Being able to not only provide a good university education, but also be able to provide good athletic activities and support. Because in a country like Zimbabwe, that the education system is completely eroded, those opportunities are very few and far between.
The education system is almost fading because majority of teachers have left, doctors are leaving, so the medical and health facilities also deteriorating. So definitely there is a drain on the country.
What brain drain refers to is when the intelligent or the educated leave the country and they are pulled out. It's the same idea with the push-pull. So we call it the brain drain when that leaves a void behind. And you see this in so many countries around the world where the question becomes, well, how can this country succeed in the future if they don't have the educated people that are still there to help bring up the next generation, to help teach the next generation, and to help really problem solve even in the present tense.
But people may also say, okay, let's look at it on the other side. And they are not talking about the issue of brain gain. So the people who are living may come and gain an experience and then go back, or since with technology they can also impact the country from wherever they are. We are yet to see whether there's going to be a brain gain. And if there's even going to be a brain gain, it depends on what happened in the country. Because most people who have left the country are not going to go back unless conditions get better, or unless there's a change in government and the way things are run.
One of the advantages that when people migrate to places where there's more opportunity is that they can make contacts with individuals who have money, who have capital that they can then invest in developing countries. And probably those individual networks, sort of a grassroots initiative of individuals who are coming from their homeland, probably can be some of the best spokespeople for what's going on back home as they gain those personal relationships and say, yeah, here's my story, here's where I came from, and I'm trying to help build schools here. I'm trying to help provide scholarships for students to be able to do this kind of activity. And that's going to be probably a very winning way to get people's attention and to get some investment locally.
I guess people are motivated by different factors, and in the case of Zimbabwe, in the case of Bratton, if you go through such a horrible experience and you get to an environment like the United States where you see there's an opportunity for you to progress and make better your life and that of your family, to me that is a bigger motivation than any other thing. So looking back at where he comes from and the opportunity he has, definitely is going to be a big factor when he's on the race running.
Certainly there can be a lot of personal motivation into going into performing well. And of course with the Olympics, there's a huge amount of pride that people have in being able to represent their country and in showing off the better parts of that country. And I think that that might be particularly true of countries who are having some sort of internal difficulties, right? That you want to be able to use the Olympic platform as a way to put your best foot forward, literally or figuratively, in order to be successful and say, look, we can accomplish some great things as a country. From a cultural standpoint, in a country where there's a lot of hardships, one thing that can develop over time for the people in that culture is an expectation that things are going to be hard. And so they don't expect the easy way out. And so what happens is that they begin to see the world as something to endure rather than escape. And I contrast that with my experience in the United States, with myself and most of my peers and people I talk to. When something hard happens, our first reaction is, how do I get out of this situation? Not how do I endure through it? But I've seen in other cultural contexts where, again, there's sort of, in some cases, it's almost fatalistic, right? The expectation that it's going to be challenging and difficult. You know, if you're faced with decades, I mean, imagine if your entire life you've never had good health care. If you've never been able to go to school, or it's been very challenging. I mean, when that's your expectation level, right? It's very different than if your expectation level is much more of an entitlement sort of idea that, oh, well, I should be able to have all of these resources or access to opportunities or things. And so it sets up a very different set of expectations. So when the colonials first arrived in Africa, the Africans did not see themselves as African. You did not have that sense of community that you're talking about that exists now. It was the Ewe and the Ga and the Ashanti and the Yoruba. So they were their own ethnic groups. And think about those as maybe separate nations, if you will, as opposed to, oh, we're all Africans. But the process of colonialism and really sort of, if you will, having an outside enemy, in a sense, unified them of us against them. And then later on, there was very much an intention by African Americans in the United States to connect with their historical roots in Africa. And that really sort of began to develop this notion of Pan-Africanism. So it connected not only African Americans and really those in the African diaspora at large back with Africa, but it also helped people in Africa to see themselves in sort of this broader community, in this broader context, of thinking about things that they had in common.
As long as Bratton is not competing with other African countries, he's Africa. The moment he's competing with another African country, then depend on which country you have alliance to or which country you are coming from. So as you just rightly gave example, Ghana and Nigeria, for example, are fierce competitors when it comes to soccer. But when Ghana was playing the World Cup and move on to the next stage, almost every African, Nigerians were even rooting for Ghana, because now it became not only a country pride, but a continent pride. So Bratton will be representing Zimbabwe, but at the same time, he will be representing Africa. And I'm sure all Africans will be rooting for him to succeed, because when he wins for Zimbabwe and possibly winning for Africa.